Welcome to Resource on the Go, a podcast from the National Sexual Violence Resource Center on understanding, responding to, and preventing sexual abuse and assault. I'm Laura Palumbo, and I'm the Communications Director at NSVRC. On today's episode, we're learning about the importance of media literacy in the shifting landscape during COVID-19 and how helping our communities think critically about the media that saturates us can help prevent sexual violence. Today, I am joined by Tonjie Reese, founder of 1124, a program dedicated to reimagining prevention through a lens of liberation and community. Tonjie draws from years of experience in youth serving and gender-based violence work to support prevention education programs serving young people of color and enhancing critical media literacy. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Just start out by telling us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So again, I'm Tonjie, and I like to describe myself as a preventionist. And for me, that means that I like to think about the root causes and figure out new and creative ways to engage with people so that we can prevent gender-based violence. So a lot of my work has been around community education. I actually started off in this movement as a peer educator, not really realizing it when I was in high school, but it was a part of our acting class. We did a traveling play around dating abuse and sexual abuse. So I spent some time being a part of that play, but also learning, and was a local community educator here right outside of Detroit, where I'm from. And I did that for some time and spent some time doing some national community organizing, and most recently worked with Just Attention International, doing work with folks who are behind bars who've been sexually assaulted. So and I'm excited to be here too. And one of the things that has grown out of the work that I've done and really through my master's program is a love for media literacy and wanting to share that awareness of how important media literacy is.
That's great. And it'd be awesome if you could help us just start out with the basics of understanding what is critical media literacy.
So critical media literacy is the ability to understand, access, evaluate, analyze, and create media, and do that in a way that you're doing activism work. So it's looking at media and understanding how media impacts us as people, what the purpose of media is, who controls the media, and also how you can use media for good and how you can use that for education, but also creating media that is equitable and that is there to support everyone.
And this seems like a really important topic right now because folks are really experiencing an unprecedented amount of screen time and using technology in various ways. It seems like ever since there was the shutdown after the start of the pandemic, that media has become more and more a part of everyone's daily life.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of us are at home. Most of us are at home and working from home, and not only just us as adults, but young people too are doing school from home. So that means that all of us are getting a lot more screen time. And in addition to that, even to get understanding of what's happening in the news and what's happening, even with the pandemic, a lot of us rely on news sources. We watch, I know when the pandemic first happened and we first started to go into shutdown, I was watching CNN every day, and it kind of stayed on TV. And so I know that was the reality for a lot of folks. And with media is not just the news either, right? It can be radio stations and social media. And social media really is the main news source for young people. So we are constantly getting messages from those news sources, but also a lot of us are spending time like watching Netflix and watching streaming channels and in front of our screens, just because it's not safe to go outside.
Yeah, I think it's really helpful how you mentioned that media is all of these different formats now. It's the news that we consume, it's social media, it's all of the social media apps on our phone and all the different ways that we engage with them. And it feels more and more like media is just really enmeshed with our lives. Like all of these forms of media are just really a part of the fabric of our daily lives. And so it can be, I think very common for people to not necessarily be in the framework of thinking that, oh, I'm consuming media right now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's really anything that is created, so all forms of, even music is a form of media too.
So can you help listeners who may be new to understanding critical media literacy and the role it plays in preventing sexual violence understand more about that framework?
Yeah. So like I mentioned before, critical media literacy is the ability to understand access to media, evaluating media, analyzing, creating media, and doing things to act. And how it fits into preventing sexual violence is sometimes I think specifically about like news stories, right? A lot of times when folks who are out in the world, right, and not in this movement, when they hear about sexual violence, a lot of times it comes from news stories. And I think about things like headlines that don't always give the correct picture of what happens. For example, Centoya Brown, when we started to learn more about her case, some news sources were saying that they're calling her an adult, even though she was trafficked as a teenager. In the news sources too, a lot of it was blaming her because and not having accountability for the person that trafficked her. We saw even more recently too with Crystal Kaiser, who was a young person in Wisconsin who was also trafficked and killed her abuser. And a lot of the media sources were saying the same things. They were calling her an adult. So a lot of those messages, that those gender stereotype messages that we know that are acting to help create rape culture, the media can play a part in that too, with things like headlines. And not only that too, I think about TV shows and movies that promote unhealthy relationships for young people that might seem like they're normal. For example, I like to use with sexual violence prevention work. I like to use TV shows like the show On My Block that's on Netflix that shows a group of like young Latinx kids that are going through relationships and understanding about themselves. But I also like to use music as well, because even like I said, music is a part of media literacy, and what we hear sometimes in songs can send these harmful messages. And even the amount of media that we consume, right? If we tie that to the health part of it, it's not healthy to consume that amount of media, but it also can shift the perspective of what reality actually is. And so learning about media literacy and young people's ability to be able to be critical about media can enable them to see those TV shows, to listen to those songs, look at those headlines, and be able to decipher things for themselves and know, wait, that is not giving accurate information. That is promoting a stereotype. That is contributing to rape culture. And it makes them a lot more, makes them investigators. It makes them more curious. And it also helps them not to, you can't unsee things. After you start to understand media literacy, it's kind of hard to back away from it. And what I found is that bringing the world really into the work that we do and bringing pop culture into the work that we do makes it more relevant, and it allows us to create that dialogue with young people, because it's something that is usually accessible, and it's something that most young people can relate to.
That's really helpful. And it sounds like in addition to the ways that a media literacy framework can just draw connections to media, how it's talking about relationships and how it's talking about gender, and how different norms or patterns are being framed, it seems like it's also a really strong avenue to get people thinking about equity and whether it be health equity or the representation of race, age, gender identity, sexual orientation. It seems like that all kind of layers in.
Right. Yeah, it does. And one of the things I've been exploring a lot recently, really since the pandemic came about, is young people of color in media literacy and how young people of color are represented in the media and some of the stereotypes that are there, but also even thinking about like as far as like even like wealth equity, thinking about access to technology. What has happened, I've talked to people about too is since a lot of us are moving from being in classrooms or being out in the community, engaging young people, a lot of that has had to happen like with them in their homes. But what about the young people that don't have access to internet in their home, or don't have access to computers, or have to share, with family members? So a big part of critical media literacy too is understanding who has access to media in your community, access to technology, who is able to have that. And that access also comes up with, like I mentioned, representation in the media, right? And thinking about who young people are seeing on television, if they look like them, if they can relate to them. And that is something that I think preventionists can do for their own work, but also to teach other young people and talk to young people about some of these disparities that are there that often kind of get overlooked.
And that really is a great lead into this next question, which is when you think about the pandemic in all that it's that's brought to the forefront and revealed, what do you think it has revealed in terms of the importance of critical media literacy?
Well, I definitely think that it has revealed that a lot of young people don't have access to technology, and the technology that young people have access to is limited. That this even the amount of technology that young people are consuming right now can be overwhelming. And also to just knowing that we're spending so much time in front of our screens. And I think the pandemic is showing what alternatives we have and how the world is, how our, like, well, I can just say our country, how things are kind of moving forward to us. I don't see us really being out of this technology-based lifestyle for some time. And that means that we have to draw from other examples. So we have to be more creative about using digital means for education. And I think too, just the impact of like a false information. Right now, even information about like vaccines right now that's happening, or how information that's on social media that's inaccurate about coronavirus, about the pandemic in general. Even being able to like recognize that, a lot of media is targeted towards demographics and areas. So I think we've seen during this pandemic, a lot of us move into this digital space. That means a lot more things are being created, but a lot more people are getting these messages. And these messages that are often normalized and are harmful are coming to us even more because they're spending so much more time in front of the screen.
And you've already talked about this a little bit, but how is that? How are all these dynamics influencing your work, and how do you find your work shifting in light of the pandemic?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, a lot more video calls, a lot more doing things over the screen, and and with that is an understanding that like it's a difference of going to a conference or going to an in-person engagement, and you're all in one space and you're sharing that space together, and what is around you in that space. So it can be easy to forget that people have lives outside of whatever is going on in the room that you're in. But I know now we're getting really personal with each other. Folks are finding whatever space that they can, to be around. And what I found is that it's made me a lot more flexible with if people do want to be, face to face, or if they want to, do something that is not face to face, or just have a phone call or just an email. So that has shifted. It also has, for me, shifted too, because doing a lot more online trainings and adjusting that style of to that style of work and that style of offering trainings. And in-person training is way different when you're able to, have like that connection with folks. You're able to have less distractions. You can have actual physical space, with each other. And now it's not the case. It's not it. And especially if you have other things that are happening around you, it can be really distracting. So how it shifted and adjusted for me is honestly being a lot more kind and gentle with my own self, and a lot more understanding with the folks that I'm working with too. And finding creative ways to use things like Zoom has shifted it. So knowing, like, I use the whiteboard option, or I'll use the annotate option to take notes. So it gives the idea if people were writing on a whiteboard, if we were in person, and making shifts that way. But also it's shifted with me and adjusted with me understanding outreach in a different way. And honestly, like working as a remote, I've worked remote probably for the last maybe 4 years. I've had a lot of remote jobs, and it's required me to I was thinking about these things before, and how and engaging with young people. With the work I did at Break the Cycle, a lot of our organizing work was with young people across the country, and that meant that we had to be on video chat, or we had to be use social media or find other creative ways to engage young people, because we weren't in schools where it's easy to access young people. So that for me has been a shift and a change to just becoming more creative on social media and more engaging and finding new ways to meet young people where they are.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of ways that the evolution to being more flexible and to using technology more also makes our work more accessible to people that might not have been able to be included in the past. Are there some ways that you feel like you will continue to, even if it's not as necessary in the future, ways that you kind of don't want to go back to doing things the way you've done them before?
Yeah, I think some ways that I won't go back to, I think, are just the expectations of participation. Because sometimes when doing like prevention education work, we can have this expectation of participation, an expectation of people having having people's undivided attention. And I know now that that is not a reality, and that doesn't mean that a person didn't get things from it, but it just means that other things are happening. So just being showing more grace in that way, I think, is and also too, in addition to like expectations of folks that I'm working with, I think even just, I don't think I will go back to the same way of even engaging with people, and engaging with like with folks too. I think I found myself more commonly asking questions about how people are doing, and that's something that I didn't always do. It's kind of like, okay, let's just jump right into it. So I think now just saving space and opportunity for folks to process whatever they need to process, and being more flexible with that too, because everyone's needs are different right now. And the best thing that we can do is make things easier for each other.
Yeah, it really brings in this whole other level of consciousness of the whole person that you're interacting with in any sort of context of all the ways that their life may be, it may be challenging for them in any particular moment.
And I think for myself too, right? I think, and I say that for myself, but I say it for other folks that do, that advocates that do this work too. I think another thing I won't do is not be as hard on myself either, and allow myself that same grace as well.
That's great. And in terms of like some takeaways that we can give to our listeners, are there some things that you think our listeners can do right now to enhance health equity in their work?
So I think right now is honestly understanding who has access to technology in their own communities. And also to think about who is missing. So if you're doing a group, or if you're doing a Zoom call, or you're having an opportunity to engage with people, think about who is missing, think about who maybe is not able to be a part of that because they don't have quiet space, they don't have, a laptop in their home or computer in the home that's free to use. People who, are or don't have that same access. That I think that is something that folks can do. But also, this is a time too to think about what is happening within your own communities in general. What are like organizations that need help and support right now? Um, that may be not super related to sexual violence work, but they're still serving the same people that you're serving. So, I think thinking about that, thinking about where the need is, because wherever there's a need, you're gonna find people, you're gonna understand people a lot better. So I think that those are some things that folks can do right now, and even in using like media literacy, for example, like I said, is also creating media, and creating media is sharing a post on social media. So if you have access to resources, or you see, someone is in need, or you see someone is hosting an event that might be interesting, or hosting something, just share things on social media, build new social media partnerships and friendships with folks. And I think that will allow us to maintain the impact that we were able to maintain when we were in person and had more access to people, especially young people.
Thanks so much. And is there any takeaways to enhance health equity for the long term that you think would be good to share with our listeners?
Yeah, and I would say long term, plan on incorporating media literacy in a part of your work, especially if you're a person that does prevention work or advocacy. Plan on adding that as a part of it, because we're moving more and more to like technology advancement, and I think more things will become digital. So just try to be ahead of the curve, and a first step could be understanding media literacy for yourself, but also incorporating that in a part of all your work that you do.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for all of these really helpful insights and tips. Is there anything before we wrap up that you would like to share with our listeners that we didn't get a chance to talk about yet?
I would say if it's okay just to share resources that I have available through 1124. I have a page just for resources for preventionists, and on there it includes books, a Spotify playlist of songs that can be used for music literacy, and also an activity. So I would say that is a resource that is there. It also has a video on there of a webinar I did over the summer about media literacy and young people of color. That's available. Because like I said, there's so much content being consumed right now by young people, and a lot of us are in front of our screens way more often, especially with wintertime coming. A lot of the people will be in the house even more, and a lot of times when we're in the house, we watch TV, we listen to music, and we engage in this type of media. So that awareness of what young people are watching and what people are listening to is so important. Even if you don't listen to it for your own enjoyment, just being aware of what young people are consuming, I think is vital and is important. And like I said, again, just teaching them what to be aware of, letting them know like about representation, and also encouraging them to create their own media is another opportunity I think that folks can use while we're here at home during this time.
That's so helpful. And we can include some links to 1124 and the resources that you've so generously shared, that no listener has to go dive into learning more about media literacy without some great tools. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And I also just want to thank you because I think that you've given me some great food for thought as a new parent. I have a 1-year-old who's sleeping right now. He's taking a nap, and it just really it makes me think about what it also means for parents who want to keep close connections with the young people in their life and their own children, and what it means to be conscious of the media environment that is prominent in their world.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. And that's so true too. One thing I did, I'm actually sending them out today. This month, I did a book giveaway. So I have folks just share and like it, share a post on Instagram and tag folks and like the post. And I had 3 winners, and I'm sending them 3 children's books that have to do with identity affirmation, so affirming identity, but also gender. Um, and also this positive self-image and self-confidence. So those are getting sent out today, and I'm really excited. And I will be doing more book giveaways too, with children's books and young adult books that promote identity affirmation, healthy relationships, and personal agency.
That's wonderful. And those are such great resources, because I can say, as a parent, that there's some things that that probably just weren't messages you heard enough when you were a kid. So they're great for both children, but also for the parents who are reading along too, to be able to see how much creativity and reimagining there is of the world right now, that is really affirming, affirming a broader audience.
Yeah, for sure. So
Well,
true.
thank you so much again for joining us, Tonjie. Thanks for listening to this episode of Resource on the Go. For more resources and information about preventing sexual assault, visit our website at nsvrc.org. You can also get in touch with us by emailing resources@nsvrc.org.